When you're faced with a moment where you feel the urge to block her, beg her, or somehow force her attention back toward you, you need to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. The strongest move you can make is not the loudest, most dramatic action. It's the calm, deliberate decision to master your own emotions. This is about regaining control, not just over the situation, but over yourself. Emotional control is the foundation of strength in any interaction, especially when feelings are running high. When you lose control, you hand over your power. You make it clear that she dictates your emotional state, your decisions, and ultimately your self worth. But when you remain composed, you send a very different message that you are stable, self assured, and not defined by anyone's presence or absence in your life. Think about it. When someone pushes you away, whether intentionally or out of uncertainty, the natural human instinct is to chase. But chasing is the language of desperation. It's an admission that you can't imagine yourself being okay without them. And that is the exact opposite of attraction. Attraction is built on value, it's sustained by respect, and respect is earned when you show that your identity isn't dependent on another person's validation. This is why mastering emotional control matters so much. It shifts the power dynamic. Instead of reacting impulsively to her actions, you're now acting deliberately with clarity and intention. When you don't beg, when you don't block her in a burst of bitterness, you create space for something she didn't expect. Dignity. Most people in these situations will act out, post emotional rants, send long pleading messages, or cut off contact out of spite. Those reactions might bring temporary satisfaction, but they also confirm her decision to pull away. They tell her she was right to think you couldn't handle yourself under pressure. On the other hand, when you remain calm, when you speak and act with measured confidence, you disrupt her expectations. Now she's not dealing with the predictable patterns she thought she knew. She's faced with mystery, restraint, and self assurance. This kind of control also gives you the ability to see the bigger picture. You start to realize that the situation is not just about her, it's about your life, your direction, and your sense of self. If she's testing you, she'll notice that you don't crumble under pressure. If she's genuinely losing interest, she'll see that you're not going to dismantle your own dignity just to keep her. And if she's confused, your composure will be the thing that makes her reconsider. In every case, emotional control works in your favor. The truth is, people are drawn to those who can remain steady in uncertain times. Anyone can be confident when everything is going their way. The real test of character is how you handle things when they're not. If you can stand firm without lashing out or clinging desperately, you communicate something rare, that you are grounded, that you are enough on your own, and that you refuse to be defined by rejection. So the next time you feel that wave of panic or frustration when she pulls away, remind yourself of this. Every reaction you choose will either build your value or erode it. Begging chips away at it. Blocking out of spite diminishes it. But calmly holding your position, refusing to be rattled, and staying focused on your own life, that builds it. And when your value rises in her eyes, her perception changes. Sometimes that's all it takes for her to start wondering what she just lost. One of the most powerful things you can do in this kind of situation is shift your focus away from her and place it squarely on yourself. This isn't about playing games or pretending you don't care. It's about genuinely prioritizing your own life, your goals, and your growth. Too many men fall into the trap of obsessively thinking about what she's doing, who she's talking to, or whether she's going to come back. That constant mental fixation creates anxiety, robs you of your energy, and subtly communicates to her that you've put your entire sense of purpose on hold until she decides how she feels about you. And the truth is, nothing is less attractive than a man who has stopped living for himself. When you start investing in yourself, your health, your career, your hobbies, your social connections, you instantly change the energy of the situation. You're no longer the guy sitting around waiting for her attention. You're the man in motion. You're creating momentum in your life, and momentum is magnetic. She will notice the shift whether you're trying to show her or not. This is because self-focus radiates confidence, and confidence draws people in. Now, there's a subtle but important point here. You can't fake it. You can't hit the gym once, post a photo, and expect her to believe you've transformed. This has to be a genuine commitment to living well, with or without her in the picture. When your actions come from a place of authenticity, they carry a different weight. People can sense when you're truly building yourself up versus when you're just putting on a show to provoke a reaction. By focusing on yourself, you also regain a sense of control over your emotions. Instead of spiraling into overthinking and desperation, you're filling your days with things that matter. You're experiencing small wins, completing a workout, finishing a project, learning something new that boost your mood and remind you of your worth. This internal shift not only improves your mental state, but it also changes the way you carry yourself. You become lighter, more relaxed, and ironically, less emotionally dependent on whether she reaches out or not. Another thing happens when you shift your focus. Your scarcity mindset starts to dissolve. When all your attention is on her, she becomes the only source of emotional fulfillment in your mind. And that's a dangerous place to be. But when you're fully engaged in your own life, you start to see possibilities everywhere. You recognize that there are other opportunities, other people, and other paths for your happiness. This doesn't mean you don't care about her. It just means you've stopped making her the center of your world. And paradoxically, that's often when she becomes more interested because she now feels she has to earn your attention again. Here's the key. When you stop chasing and start building, you stop operating from a place of neediness. You're not texting her every hour to check in. You're not dropping everything to respond to her messages. And you're not hanging on every word she says. Instead, you're living with purpose, and she can feel that shift. That quiet confidence can spark curiosity and respect in a way that constant pursuit never could. So instead of wasting your energy worrying about why she's distant, take that same energy and pour it into becoming the best version of yourself. Not because it'll guarantee she comes back, but because it'll guarantee that no matter what happens, you come out stronger, more fulfilled, and more attractive, not just to her, but to the world around you. And that's a win in every sense of the word. Silence is one of the most underrated and powerful responses you can give in a situation where emotions are high and dynamics are shifting. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, and stop trying to convince her of your worth, you give her something she may not have expected: space to feel your absence. Most people underestimate how impactful this space can be. They think if I'm not constantly reminding her I'm here, she'll forget me. But the opposite often happens. The moment you step back and go quiet, you remove the pressure from the situation and create an emotional vacuum that she will notice. You have to understand something. When you've been giving someone constant attention, affection, or reassurance, it becomes a kind of emotional background noise in their life. They get used to it. It's comfortable, predictable, always there. And as human nature goes, what's always available often starts to get taken for granted. Your consistent presence becomes something she doesn't even have to think about. But when you go silent, you disrupt that pattern. Suddenly, the certainty she once had that you'd always be there starts to fade. That's when curiosity kicks in. She starts wondering, why isn't he calling me? Why isn't he sending a message? Did something change? That curiosity often leads to self reflection. She begins to think about what she's done, how she's acted, and why you might have decided to pull back. This is not about punishing her, it's about letting the reality of your absence speak louder than any words you could say. Silence also works because it gives both people emotional breathing room. When feelings are raw or tension is high, words can easily be misunderstood, escalated, or used against you. By staying quiet, you avoid saying things in frustration or desperation that could harm your position. You avoid sending long emotional messages that put you in a weaker frame. Instead, you're giving yourself time to regain composure and clarity while allowing her the chance to experience what life feels like without your presence front and center. It's important to remember that silence is not the same as passive aggressive withdrawal. You're not ignoring her out of spite, and you're not counting the days until she cracks. You're simply redirecting your energy away from her and toward your own life. You're making the conscious choice not to fill every gap with communication, not to rush in to fix things, and not to force a resolution. Ironically, silence often communicates strength better than any grand statement could. It shows that you are capable of holding your ground, of living your life without needing constant validation or attention from her. It demonstrates emotional maturity, the kind that says, I care about you, but I also value myself enough not to beg for your time or affection. That kind of quiet confidence has a way of commanding respect. Another reason silence is so effective is that it creates contrast. If you've been overly available, your absence feels like a sharp change in the weather. She notices the difference because the emotional climate between you has shifted. And in that shift, she has to decide how much she values the connection. Sometimes it's only in the silence that she begins to truly miss what she had. When done with the right intention, silence is not about closing the door. It's about letting the other person walk toward it on their own. And if she does, it's because she's making the choice freely, not because you've pushed her into it. That's far more powerful and far more lasting than anything you could have convinced her of with words alone. One of the most powerful moves you can make in this situation is to redirect all the energy you were pouring into her back into yourself. When you stop chasing, you suddenly have mental, emotional, and even physical bandwidth that can be used for something far more productive, your own growth. Too many men make the mistake of letting their lives shrink down to the size of the relationship. They center every thought, every decision, and every ounce of energy around her. The moment she senses this imbalance, she instinctively feels less attraction. Why? Because attraction thrives in the presence of independence, purpose, and mystery, not desperation. This isn't this ironic that I and a ring, sorry, I and when you make the decision to focus on your own life, you're making a statement without saying a word that your value doesn't depend on her approval or attention. You start showing her through your actions that you have a life worth living, whether she's part of it or not. And that changes the dynamic completely. Instead of her being the prize you're chasing, you become the man who naturally draws interest because he's building something meaningful for himself. This isn't just about pretending to be busy. Anyone can spot fake self improvement. This is about genuinely investing in yourself. Go to the gym, pick up a new skill, work on your career, deepen your friendships, or dive into passions you may have neglected. The more you do this, the more your energy shifts. You stop radiating neediness and start radiating self assurance. People can feel it. She can feel it. And this shift in energy often speaks louder than any attempt to explain your worth verbally. There's another important side to this. When you focus on yourself, you naturally create scarcity. You're no longer available at her every beck and call, which forces her to experience life without you always there to fill the gaps. This absence can be uncomfortable for her, but it's exactly what allows her to feel the contrast between what life was like when you were fully engaged and what it's like when you're not. Scarcity breeds value. The less accessible you are, the more she has to consider whether she truly wants to be part of your world. What makes this approach so effective is that it works regardless of the outcome. If she comes back, she's returning to a man who has grown, leveled up, and strengthened himself, not the same man she may have taken for granted. If she doesn't come back, you're still in a better position than before with stronger sense of self, more opportunities, and a clear direction in life. It's a win either way. There's also a subtle psychological effect at play here. When you start investing in yourself, you send a silent message. I'm the kind of man who doesn't stay stuck in one place. I move forward, I grow, I evolve. That's attractive on a deep primal level because it signals that you are capable of leading your own life. You're not waiting for someone else to save you or complete you. You're already whole. It's worth remembering that real attraction is not built through constant pursuit, but through a balance of connection and space. By focusing on yourself, you're creating that space while also becoming more magnetic. You're not just stepping back, you're stepping up. And when she sees you thriving without her constant involvement, it forces her to reevaluate her place in your life. The bottom line is simple. When you stop centering your world around her and start centering it around your own growth, you become the man she either regrets losing or respects enough to pursue again. Either way, you win. When emotions run high and you feel the urge to do something, anything to get her attention, one of the wisest choices you can make is to master the art of strategic silence. Silence, in the right context, isn't passive, it's deliberate, it's a statement. It communicates strength, composure, and emotional self-control in ways that words simply can't. Most men sabotage themselves not because they lack value, but because they over-communicate their feelings and intentions, especially when things feel uncertain. They text too much, call too often, and try to explain or fix the situation through constant contact. Ironically, this only pushes her further away because it removes the very space she needs to feel curiosity or desire again. By choosing to remain silent, you shift the dynamic entirely. You're no longer feeding her constant updates about your life or giving her the reassurance she might expect you to provide out of habit. Instead, you allow her to sit with her own thoughts, her own feelings, and her own memories of you without you trying to influence the process. This is powerful because when there's nothing new to respond to, the human mind naturally drifts back to what's missing. If she's used to you being ever present, your absence will stand out like a loud silence in the middle of a conversation. The key here is intention. Silence doesn't mean you're sulking or pouting in the corner. It's not about passive aggressive punishment. It's about living your life fully without announcing every detail and letting the absence of constant communication become a statement of its own. You're not withdrawing because you're bitter. You're stepping back because you value your peace, your time, and your self-respect. This distinction matters. And here's what happens when you embrace this approach. Her imagination takes over. Instead of her knowing exactly what you're doing and where you stand, she's left to fill in the gaps herself. Is he busy? Is he moving on? Is he talking to someone else? That uncertainty creates a kind of emotional tension, And tension, when combined with attraction, can reignite curiosity in ways direct pursuit simply can't. This doesn't just affect her perception of you, it changes your own state of mind as well. When you're not chasing, you have the space to think clearly. You're no longer reacting to every little thing she does or says. Instead, you're in control of your own actions and emotions, which is where your real power lies. You can assess the situation from a position of strength rather than desperation. It's also worth mentioning that silence often reveals truths you might not have noticed otherwise. If she reaches out after you've pulled back, it's a clear signal that she feels your absence. If she doesn't, you gain valuable clarity about where she really stands. Either way, you're getting information that constant communication would have obscured. Of course, silence works best when it's paired with visible progress in your own life. If you disappear and do nothing, the effect weakens. But if you disappear while simultaneously improving yourself, leveling up your life, and radiating self-assuredness, the silence becomes a backdrop for your growth. That's when she notices. That's when she wonders. That's when she rethinks her assumptions. So don't underestimate the quiet power of doing less. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, sometimes the strongest message is the one you don't send. Let her feel the weight of your absence. Let her realize that your attention is not something she can take for granted. And most importantly, let your silence speak for you. It often says more than words ever could. Sometimes the most magnetic thing a man can do is redirect his focus entirely onto his own life. When you stop centering your energy on her every move and instead pour it into your own growth, ambition, and well-being, something remarkable happens. You reclaim your frame. Too often, men lose themselves in the pursuit of a woman's approval. They let her moods dictate their moods, her availability dictate their priorities, and her attention dictate their sense of worth. But when you shift the focus inward, you send a subtle yet undeniable message. You are the prize, not the pursuer. This shift isn't about playing games or pretending to be too busy. It's about actually becoming so engaged in your own life that you genuinely don't have the time or mental bandwidth to obsess over hers. When you're working on your fitness, advancing in your career, developing new skills, or expanding your social circle, you're creating an environment in which your confidence grows naturally. You're not trying to manufacture attraction. You're becoming the kind of man who naturally draws people in. And here's the paradox. The less you revolve around her world, the more she becomes intrigued by yours. Human nature gravitates toward what feels slightly out of reach. When she sees you thriving without her input or validation, it creates a kind of tension, one that sparks curiosity and even regret. She begins to wonder what's happening in your life, who you're meeting, and what experiences you're having without her. This isn't about making her jealous, it's about living in such a way that your value is undeniable. Focusing on yourself also protects you from emotional overinvestment in uncertain situations. When you put all your attention on her, you're essentially gambling your emotional stability on something you can't control. But when you invest that energy in yourself, you're making a sure bet. The progress you make in your own life is yours to keep, regardless of what happens between you and her. That sense of self-reliance is incredibly attractive, not just to her, but to anyone you encounter. Another aspect to consider is that growth has momentum. The more you push yourself toward your goals, the more doors open. You start meeting new people, encountering new opportunities, and broadening your horizons. Suddenly, your life isn't defined by whether or not she texts you back. It's defined by your own drive and discipline. That's when you move from a place of waiting to a place of creating. And that shift changes everything. From her perspective, this is where the reality check comes in. If she once believed you'd always be available, always ready to drop everything for her, your renewed focus challenges that assumption. She may start to see that your time and energy are valuable commodities, ones she must earn rather than expect. That realization can spark a change in her behavior, making her more likely to re engage on your terms. Even if she doesn't, you've gained something far more valuable: the ability to stand solid in your own life without leaning on her presence for validation. It's not just attractive, it's freeing. You're no longer playing from a position of need, but from a position of abundance. You're choosing, not chasing. At the end of the day, women respect men who respect themselves, and nothing communicates self respect more clearly than a man who invests in his own life, guards his energy, and refuses to lose himself in the process of pursuing someone else. So instead of blocking her, begging her, or bending your life around her decisions, focus entirely on building yours. That's how you reclaim your power, your peace, and, ironically, often her attention as well.